Hi, Hunter Hastings here. We are making great strides in moving on from the traditional command and control management, the top-down hierarchical approach where bosses tell subordinates what to do, and there's a forced march to a fixed point called making the numbers. Those days of drudgery are over. The new world of business revolves around concepts like balance and harmonization and collaboration and teamwork and flow. Those aren't traditional concepts, in Western management at least, but if we look east, we find that their development is ancient. And as increasing complexity overwhelms the command and control approach, it just can't cope, we look to new sources such as ancient Chinese philosophy to develop our new concepts. We're talking with Erik Schön today. Erik is Managing Director at Erlang Solutions AB in Sweden. He's also the leading interpreter of ancient Chinese philosophy and the insights it contains for business today. There are many, many valuable ideas to help us break out of the command and control box. Let's talk to Erik and discover what they are.
This is the Value Creators Podcast. Value creation is the sole purpose of any business and every business, and for all of us as entrepreneurs. Listen to great value creators as they share their successes, trials, and lessons learned. Join us as we explore how to think as value creators, how to act as value creators, and how to view business through the lens of value creation.
Erik, welcome back to the Value Creators Podcast.
Thank you, Hunter. It's a pleasure.
You help the world, Erik, think better about some of its biggest challenges. So last time you were here, we talked about your book, The Art of Strategy, and we learned a lot about how to think about strategy. Another book of yours is The Art of Leadership, which is, I think, a very difficult and sometimes contentious concept in business management. You helped us with that. Your latest book is called The Art of Change, and that's what we'll focus on today. Yep, there it is. And I've just been to a couple of conferences. We have regular discussion groups, and I hear people saying the rate of change is changing, it's accelerating, and the volume of change is greater, and the amplitude of change is greater. And people worry about that, how we're going to cope with it. One of the things I take from your book is that concern is wrong. We've had change since ancient times, and we've had worries about change since ancient times. So let me use that as an introduction. Perhaps you can tell us about the book and its genesis and its background and how you composed it, and then we'll start to dig in.
Yeah, for sure. Turbulent times. We live in turbulent times, right? And going back in time to ancient China, what is now China, it wasn't even China at the time. It was 10x or 100x worse because they had hundreds of years of wars, pandemics, social upheaval. So you can discuss if it was 10x worse than today or 100x worse. So that's really my starting point, how to sustainably succeed in those turbulent times, and getting some inspiration, getting some insights from eternal wisdom, in this case from what is now China, because they were also living in turbulent times, maybe even in some senses worse than what we are living in. And that could help us with first principles for change, and that's why I wrote the book, The Art of Change, for first principles for leadership, hence the art of leadership, and first principle for strategy and the art of strategy. And this is all my modern interpretations of classic works like Sun Tzu's The Art of War, which I turned into The Art of Strategy, and the I Ching, which we're going to talk about today, which is The Art of Change, and then the Lao Tzu Tao Te Ching, which in my modern interpretation is called The Art of Leadership. So this is a trilogy, and for me, it started, 24, 25 years back when I worked with strategy as a practitioner. And, one of my managers at the time said, I don't like Sun Tzu's Art of War. I like Clausewitz much better. And then, of course, I had to read The Art of War, and now, 20 something years later, I read pretty much all the translations and interpretations that exist, and they're all pretty good, but they all have one aspect or one perspective they focus on. Either it's the ancient Chinese language, or it's Chinese history, or it's Chinese philosophy, or it's military strategy. So what I thought I could bring to the table is, the practitioner perspective, because I've been a manager and an executive for many, many years. So I lived and worked with strategy, with leadership, with change. So reading these classic works with modern glasses, that's what I try to contribute with this trilogy. And that's a little bit about, the background and what got me into this. It's those first principles, because we're still human beings, right? We haven't changed a lot as human beings in the past 2,000 years. And in the case of the I Ching, it goes back even longer. It's almost 3,000 years. So these were among the first works that were written down back in the day. So that's an attempt of summarizing the sort of background.
Good. Well, thank you for that. And let's try and take that practitioner's point of view, Erik, and see if we can be directional and specific about that. Well, one of the words that came into my head as I'm trying to distill the learning from the book was mindset. That one of the phrases is be prepared for a full range of changes. A full range. So there's going to be a lot, and it's going to be widespread, and you're going to have to deal with it. So how does I Ching advise us to develop that mindset, to be prepared for a full range of changes?
Yeah, there's something called the expected and the surprise, and this is, I mean, you can, if you expect nothing is really a surprise, and this could be considered as something very deep or very, very natural. But what is the expected? Let's take a modern day example. Let's take the first iPhone. The first iPhone had all the expected things. You could call with it. You could make phone calls. You could browse the internet, and you can send messages. That was expected. The unexpected thing is you had it in a small device, and it was super simple to use, and that was the wow, the desire to use, the total surprise, the positive surprise. So I think that having this pair of expected and surprise, if you try to think of that in your daily work and what you do as a practitioner, if you're developing products or if you're developing services, that's the mindset. There will be unexpected things, but if you try to get rid of expectation, nothing will really surprise you in a sense. So mindset is hard, right? It's hard to get into people's heads, and we don't want to do that really. But if we can act as if nothing is surprising to us, and well, I think it's a lot about having expectations that are sometimes well-founded and sometimes not, and that could lead you into diversions and false starts. That's my personal experience anyway.
So we should expect surprises.
Yes, and sometimes expect nothing. I mean, try to have no expectations. Just be there in the moment.
Yeah.
Moment. Be there daily with your family, with your colleagues, with your customers, and let go of those expectations. It's hard, I know, from personal experience, but try to be in the moment and limit your expectations, and then you will not be surprised. You're more. That will help you to be more flexible, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Okay, that's a much better way to help me think. So the next step that I took out of your book, Erik, was one way to deal with that. Deal with might be the wrong term, but it said we must persist with change through perseverance. And then one of those wonderful ancient phrases, as thunder as wind, which it's hard for Western brains to interpret that. So tell us about perseverance as thunder and as wind.
Yeah, perseverance. That's a big word, right? And I think that's. I mean, we have that all across the globe, in North America, in South America, in Europe, and in Asia. But let me go back to some mythology, and this is not only mythology; it's totally relevant in Japan today. That I happen to know very well. I worked there and lived there for many years. So baseball. There's two very popular baseball teams in Japan. One is called the Chunichi Dragons, and the other one is Hiroshima Carps. So dragons and carps, those are not typical names of baseball teams in the US,
Mm-hmm.
or ice hockey teams, or football teams, not in Europe, not in the US. But this just shows how important that mythology still is. So the dragon has been around for 7,000 years. So there's stories for kids. The baseball teams are named after dragons. They are the ultimate shapeshifters. They can change, their shape, their color, their weight. They can be underwater. They can be in the sky. They can do pretty much everything. So again, I mean, the change is there. Those are the most powerful mythical beasts in Asian mythology. Then we come to the carp. The carp has this perseverance. So the story of the carp is that it swims upstream through a river up to a very high top of a high mountain. So it struggles, it fights, and all the children in Asia knows this story about the carp struggling to achieve the goal. And at the end, it comes to a waterfall. It's the Dragon's Gate, and it managed to jump across that waterfall, and then the carp turns into a dragon. So, so the ultimate goal of the perseverance is to turn into this ultimate shapeshifter. And the baseball team, the Hiroshima Carps, they never win the major league. They're struggling, but everyone roots for them because they're the underdog, and everyone knows the story of the carp. It's perseverant. They will eventually win the major league. They will win the championship, and they've done so. But they've been struggling for 50, 60 years. So a little bit about the background and the stories, and trying to relate those mythologies into change, because it's been around for 7,000 years in Asia, and it's very, very deep into the culture, and of course that influences people and these books. So I don't know if it was so much about wind and thunder, but something about carps and dragons that hopefully can be
Carps and
relatable.
dragons, right?
Yeah, and baseball.
So one of the elements that I found it a little bit difficult to interpret, Erik, was two things. One, I Ching says we must act to learn fast in the midst of change. So, as entrepreneurs and economists, we like that thought. Entrepreneurship is action. You get a feedback loop. You learn, and so that part is relatable. But then there's a lot of advice about patience and waiting, being calm, watching things unfold, rather than being too impetuous. Those two things are a little bit hard to balance, the patience with the action. So help us through that.
Yeah, and the key word, you said it's balance, right? And it's even called timely balance, and that's one of the key things in the I Ching, or the art of change. So balancing decisions and actions based on timing and the context. Sometimes you step in and you act. Sometimes you step back and you wait. And finding that balance is super important. And again, this is this correlative pair, action, non-action, or effortless action. And this is another key thing to be aware of, that sometimes you just let things unfold. I mean, think of sailing versus rowing. Rowing, you put a lot of effort, you put a lot of action into rowing. But if you just put the sail and you go with the wind, and you don't need to put so much effort in it. And it's really about effectiveness, achieving the maximum effort with a minimal impact, or the outcomes. You want to reach maximum outcomes with a minimal effort. Let's put it like that. And that could, the metaphor could be rowing, or it could be, you need to put in a lot of effort, and you get some outcomes. But if you sail, it's not so much effort that you need to put in, but you put a sail to your boat, and you get those outcomes anyway. So sometimes you don't need to put in a lot of action. You just go with the flow, you go with the wind, and that will lead you to it. But again, it's timely balance. Sometimes you step in, sometimes you step back, and you need to sense the timing and the context, and that's not easy. That takes practice, and it takes effort to know when to do it.
Yeah, so let me press a little bit harder on that if it's helpful, Erik. So how do we find that balance? So you said we talk a lot about experimentation. Keep trying things, find out what works and what doesn't, and build the pile of what works and discard the pile of what doesn't. Is that a route to balance, you think, the idea of experimentation?
For sure, you need to try things. You need to try things out, and that's several of the chapters in the I Ching, or the art of change, as I call it, are about learning and trying things out, and not being too hard on yourself if you don't succeed immediately, and then we're back to perseverance. So learning for sure is important, and in order to learn, you need to try, you need to experiment. So that's all in there, going back 2,000-3,000 years.
Yeah. Let me make sure that we understand learning the same way as it's expressed in I Ching. So we think about learning as accumulation of knowledge, especially useful knowledge that we can go on and apply in new ways. Is that the same idea that we're talking about in I Ching?
Yeah, I think it's very, very practical. Knowledge should be useful, as you say, then it's valuable. So it's very pragmatic in that sense. Um, so again, it's not theoretical knowledge that you're after. It's the hands-on, the practical knowledge that you find when doing the work, when doing the learning. So that's very much in there.
So one of the thoughts, one of the discussions we often have is about the flow of knowledge, the flow of learning, and the idea of whether that is turbulent? Is it those surprises that you were talking about? Is it sporadic? Or can we think of it more smoothly, like sailing? Which of those, and maybe it's both, but which of those is more akin to learning?
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of definitions of flow, right? I mean, psychological, organizational, attitudinal, and in the I Ching, I think it's a metaphor for agility. The ability to adapt to and influence situations more skillfully than your competitors, and that includes also being able to break out of successful patterns that are not sustainable anymore. So think about water. Water is a fantastic metaphor. Water adjusts to the landscape when flowing, and if we can be more like water and follow the least resistance, follow the line of least resistance, that's being like water, and that's one of the modern day Eastern philosophers, Bruce Lee. I mean, be like water. That's a classic thing that he said, and yeah, just like water, to progress and to succeed, and to maybe not crush the resistance, but go around the resistance. So that goes for flow in general, and I guess it's flow when you're learning. Don't go head on. Try to be more like water and go around the obstacles.
Yeah, we've been looking at the concept of flow from Adrian Bijan. I don't know whether you know that name, but he talks about flow in nature. It's a force of physics. And his image is the river basin that from the smallest tributary in the high mountains is always finding its way to the ocean. Whatever the obstructions are, it gets there, as you say, up and around. That brings me to another thought. The I Ching, as you presented to us, says avoid coercion and force, which that's an attractive image. But if you think about water, it builds up its momentum. It's got a great force. It could become a tsunami or it could rage over the waterfall. So there's coercion and force there. So
Yeah,
which is it with water?
that's a really good point, and that just shows the beauty of the water metaphor. Water can also be ice. It could be vapor. So again, it depends on the context and the situation. Um, so water is a metaphor for life, even, and we see this in complexity, process complexity research today, and you mentioned one of the persons of that movement. There's others as well, and again, those metaphors go back to the art of war, or the art of strategy, as I call it, and to the I Ching. Water as a metaphor is there, and going with the flow and try to get these effortless actions in some situations. In other situations, you want to build up uh, the momentum and use that to your advantage. So that's another possibility.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of that. What's the right word? Balance. Let's use the word balance as I read through your interpretation of I Ching. There's force, as we've talked about, momentum, and there's gentle movement. There's patience, but there's also action. So this idea of the balancing of the two elements at the same time, being able to think two thoughts at once, seems to be a part of the mindset that we're trying to achieve here. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah. That's isn't that the John Scott Fitzgerald quote? I mean, the definition of a thinking person is to be able to hold two contradictory thoughts in your head at the same time, and then still be able to function. So again, it's modern, but it's also 2,000-3,000 years old wisdom, and it's still relevant, in the 20th century, 21st century, as it was 2,000-3,000 years ago, because we're still humans, and those correlative pairs, those pairs of opposites, as you may call them, inertia, flow, stability, change, integrity, flexibility, to be aware of that those pairs exist, and it's not either or, it could be both, and it could be a matter of choosing one over the other, depending on the context and the timing.
Yeah.
That's something that we can do more of, I think.
Yes, it's a great challenge to the Western mind anyway. Maybe the Eastern mind is better at it.
Yeah,
Let me
but
pick
John,
out an. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, John Scott Fitzgerald. I mean, he was onto something, right? And he's part of sort of the northern or western world. So yeah.
Yeah, true. Well, another word that uh, expresses balance in the way that I read your book, Erik, was integrity. Integrity, as it's used in I Ching, is a form of balance. So help us with that.
Yeah, I would say that the key part of integrity. I mean, if you look at the Chinese characters, this is a picture language, right? So you can sort of analyze what the component part of the Chinese character for integrity, what they mean. So it actually means something very concrete. It's walking straight, following your heart and mind. And heart and mind, it's like you combine your gut feel, you combine your what's in your heart with what's in your brain. So it's like the combo there. So walking straight, following your heart and mind and gut. That's sort of the very concrete
It's nice.
definition or explanation of integrity, going back 2, 3, 5,000 years. And I think that's makes sense to me. But then the contrary or the opposite part here is flexibility, because it's a lot about flexibility, being flexible in the moment, not expecting anything but be ready for everything, and in the sense of being flexible in the moment while keeping your integrity. So this is the balance act, or I mean, you don't want to lose your integrity, you don't want to be over flexible, so you need this force field between integrity and flexibility that I find fascinating, and it comes back in many of the chapters in the book.
We're delighted to announce the Value Creators online course. For entrepreneurs in every kind of business, big, small, or medium, at every stage, in every industry, our course provides the foundations and principles on which to build success. Simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to creativity, innovation, and competitively superior business action. There are 11 foundational principles or mental models that together cohere into the value business model. Principles for value generation, principles for value operations, principles for value finance and accounting, and principles for value sustainability, as well as the new knowledge accumulation you'll need for continuous innovation. These principles are delivered by top business professors from top business schools: Mark Packard, Per Byland, Gordon Miller, David Rapp, and Bart Vanderhagen. You'll find video lessons from them, along with downloadable tools, processes, and other valuable content. Master these lessons, and you'll master the most important skill in business: value creation. Go to thevaluecreators.com and click the course link. Yeah, it is fascinating. And so one of the thoughts that goes through my little brain when I think about that is you can never get that right. There's a journey through those elements, the flexibility and the integrity, and you try to find the balance that's right for the context and right for you, but there isn't a right. There's
It depends on
constant progress.
It depends on the context. So that's the tricky thing. You need to be aware of what's happening in the moment, with the people that are in the moment. So yeah, but that's the art of being human.
Yeah. Well, we'll try and get better at it. So
Yeah.
here's another here's another word that appears in I Ching, if I get your interpretation right, and it also appears in business a lot today, and that's the idea of purpose. So business talk is the inspiring, guiding, higher meaning of a corporation or firm that can unite all of us together in a shared purpose. I Ching seems to put more emphasis on the personal balance that we've just been talking about, as opposed to a group or a firm. Is that right? Or
I think it's a
how
bit.
can we talk about purpose in I Ching?
No, it's a bit of both. So purpose. You may have heard of the Tao or the Tao, the
Mm-hmm.
way, the
The
principle.
way, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And again, going back to what the Chinese character actually means, it's a foot which is moving, and a head, hair and eye. So it's moving or leading your head. So it's giving direction to your steps, or giving direction to your life, which is sort of individual, right? But that can be generalized to giving direction to the team, giving direction to the family, or giving direction to the society. So it's very concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's where I would start. But then on the other hand, another very early usage of this Chinese character from thousands of years back is guiding the flow of a river to prevent it from flooding the banks. Very concrete, talking about
Mm-hmm.
flow, talking about nature. So purpose as guiding a river to prevent it from flooding the banks. That's another meaning here. So it is important. It's super important, both on the individual level and on the team or organizational level. And remember these big words: purpose, integrity, flexibility. It may sound very, very sort of non-business-like, and you may call it even soft in some sense, whatever you mean by soft. But remember that these are the operating principles of the U.S. Marines. they operate through integrity, purpose, and flexibility. Those are key
Mm-hmm.
words for the U.S. Marines. So again, hooking those 2,000-3,000 years old wisdom to present day. We're still human beings. We have missions to fulfill. Sometimes it's a church, sometimes it's the U.S. Marines, and there are things that we can, be inspired by from these old, ancient, eternal wisdom.
Yeah, and they sound abstract, but to go back to your word at the beginning, they're actually practical. If you can think about integrity, purpose, and flexibility, you can act, and they're practical guidance. Stops the river from flooding over the banks.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so I Ching recognizes a couple of elements that are important to business. One is capability. We talk about a firm having capabilities, and I Ching says that hey, you need capabilities in order to perform. It also recognizes competition and competing, although it seems more comfortable with collaboration. So let's think in those business terms: building capability and being competitive. Is that part of the philosophy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, capabilities, it's a big word, sometimes a bit abstract, but I think it's just the ability to fulfill your stakeholders' needs. Stakeholders could be your customers, it could be your colleagues. So take it back to that. I mean, they have needs, and you need to build the capabilities to fulfill those needs. That's the way to relate it to business, I say. And so that's for capabilities. When it comes to competition and collaboration, I try to talk about, sometimes we talk about winning and competition, and going back to fulfilling stakeholders' needs. I mean, I'd rather talk about success. How do we succeed together with our stakeholders? That's a slightly different uh, framing than talking about let's win by crushing our competitors. You can think about succeeding together with your stakeholders, and success being fulfilling your purpose. So it goes back to purpose again. How do we fulfill our purpose um, uh, together with our stakeholders? Then you may have competitors, in the sense that they also have a purpose. They desire to fulfill similar stakeholders' needs that you do. So in that sense, you're competing for the same space in a business landscape, for instance. Um, but having said all this, the emphasis in the I Ching, or the art of change, is clearly on collaboration, because in order to fulfill the needs of your stakeholders, you need to work together. And if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So there's I think it's 4 or 5 chapters in the book that you know talks about different aspects of teamwork, collaboration, how to set up teamwork, and how to work together. So I think this goes back to a society where people had to collaborate to survive, because
Mm-hmm.
they were growing crops, they were growing rice, and if they didn't collaborate, no food. So um, that's sort of the starting point. And again, I mean, take it to the U.S. Marines; they need to collaborate to fulfill their mission. And of course, there's competition there. There's war going on. So yeah.
Yeah. So there's another big word which sometimes sounds abstract, but I'm seeing it more and more in business and actually in the military as well, which is harmony. That you've got all of these teams working together. You've got individuals with different skills and maybe capabilities, but they all work together. And if you can get that into harmony, then again, that group output that you're talking about is enhanced. So again, I may get that wrong because I don't understand I Ching like you do. So let's talk about harmony.
Yeah, harmony, another big word. And well, you can think about music. You can think about a choir. They sing in harmony. That means that they got in tune with each other, they're singing from the same hymn sheet. You can talk about words like alignment, you can talk about coherence, you can talk about unity. Those are synonyms, right? Again, going back to the Chinese character, it's grain or rice and the mouth, so it's very culinary. It's food meeting the mouth, in the sense of finding some kind of combining or blending the ingredients so that they enhance each other, uh, without losing their distinct individual flavor. So that's sort of the metaphorical or original meaning of the character. And of course, that could make sense if you're in a marching band, or if you're in a football team or in a baseball team. You want to maximize the diversity and avoid sameness, because not everyone can be the best pitcher of the team. Someone needs to be the outfielder, someone needs to be the first stop. And people, they have different tempers. So this is very important, and that's the way I choose to interpret harmony. You need to coordinate the details. You need to have an element of diversity. You want to have you want to avoid uniformity, but you still want the unity, and the unity of purpose. And if that's a rock band or a marching band or a choir, um, and going back to the musical metaphor, singing in harmony. So I think that's, well, if you don't like the word harmony, you can talk about alignment, you can talk about coherence, or your favorite synonym. But I think this culinary metaphor with the food or the rice meeting the mouth is pretty interesting.
Yeah. So one of the overarching elements for thinking through this, everything that we've talked about, I picked up was direction. Knowing which direction you're moving in and maintaining that direction, although, as you said, you might get pushed off the path from time to time, but you're flexible, you can keep going in the right direction. That appealed to me as a way of maintaining persistence. If I am confident I'm going in the right direction, whatever the distractions and displacements along the way, that is what will keep my balance and integrity. So I like that idea of direction. Is that a good thing to take away from the book?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. So having found this purpose, uh, you need to start moving in a direction. You have your, call that your North Star, or purpose. That's important, and of course that can change. It shouldn't change too often, but that's something that you need to harmonize with your team or your organization, and then you start moving. You start moving in a direction that will take you closer to your purpose. Um, and the purpose could be as simple as fulfilling your stakeholders' needs. That could be a purpose, and then you can make it more specific, of course. But then start moving in a direction. You don't know exactly how to get there, but by starting to move, you will learn along the way. So sometimes you talk about the path is made through walking, and that's exactly what it is. You will create your path or your way, um, by starting to move, and you need to have a direction to start moving in. You don't want to go in circles, obviously, and then you can shift direction as the context would change, and that's also okay. But you don't have an exact destination.
Mm-hmm.
You may not know that, and that's okay, as long as you start moving, because you will learn and you will figure it out.
Yeah. Or it may change, as you say.
Mm.
So I'm going to pick off a couple of words from the cover of the book, Erik. We haven't talked about patterns yet. So the subtitle of The Art of Change is Patterns for Success. And in modern science of complex adaptive systems, we talk about emerging patterns. You can't always predict them, but they emerge through the interaction of the individuals with the environment. What are you thinking when you talk about patterns for change, patterns for success, rather?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, and there's recent research and a book published just a couple of weeks back by a scholar and practitioner in the UK by the name of Jane Boulder. She calls it the Tao of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
So she also found this connection between process complexity and the complex adaptive system and what was going on in China, or what's now called China, 2,000-3,000 years ago, and patterns. Well, what they try to do when they wrote down what I call the art of change was to sort of map out the world as they experienced it in 64 chapters. Those 64 chapters could basically map a person's life, or a country's life, or a society's life. And those chapters were originally like divination. You were you were predicting things, and I think we're way past that. But still, those 64 chapters, you can help those patterns. Those patterns will help you to and guide you in your present day modern life. Um, for example, by okay, I'm struggling with teamwork. I can read the 5 chapters that are related to teamwork, and those questions, those 6 questions that are the basis of each chapter, will help me to find different perspectives on teamwork, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of you have the patterns in sort of 2 dimensions. One is the 64 chapters, and you check the chapter headings, and you can sort of dig into those chapters that are most relevant to you in your current situation. And then the 6 questions in each of the chapters will help you to find your answer in your context by applying different perspectives to make you think and act and behave in a slightly different way. So those are sort of trying to structure the patterns in a lightweight manner, if you will.
Yeah, I hadn't picked that up. There are 6 questions in each chapter. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So those chapters will help you. Just to give you a flavor of it,
Yeah,
let's
please.
take a teamwork, one of the teamwork chapters. So I have prepared here a bit. So let's find the right one here. It should be chapter 20, no, 37. So chapter 37, teamwork. So when collaborating, how might we agree on how to collaborate? When collaborating, how might we match capabilities with needs? When collaborating, how might we offer and accept feedback? When collaborating, how might we offer and accept help? When collaborating, how might we lead by example? When collaborating, how might we show integrity? So these are 6 open questions that
Mm-hmm.
could help you dig a bit deeper into the teamwork. I mean, when you start collaborating, when you do collaborate, and this is just one out of, I think it's 3, 4, or 5 chapters on collaboration, teamwork, and setting up teams, and it all follows from purpose and integrity. You need to start there. That will help you with the teamwork as well.
Yeah,
So just to give you a flavor of the patterns and how it's structured in the I Ching and in
yeah,
the art of change.
a good way to use the book.
Yeah.
So,
And you can actually random. I mean, if you
mhm.
want an element of randomness, you can just, flip through the pages and you just start reading at a chapter, and that could be, whichever chapter. I just open up and see, chapter 36, darkness. When severely challenged, how might we? And then you have the 6 questions again. So that's another way of just jumping into the book completely randomly
Yeah,
and see where you end up.
good. That's really helpful. I hadn't understood that way of using the book, so thank you. So, final question for today, Erik, is the other word on the title of the book is the art of change, and you also talked about the art of strategy and the art of leadership, and I find that particularly appealing. A lot of us subjectivists worry that the whole last century and a half has been characterized by positivism. Everything has a number, everything has an equation. Ian McGilchrist calls it left brain thinking. Everything's got to be ordered into lists and methods and processes and so on. You chose to use the word art. And so thinking of business as an art and life as an art and change as an art is really helpful. So just please give us some of your thinking about the art. Why is it an art?
Well, I think it's just as you said, Hunter. I mean, it's not either or. I think you can have the structure and the engineering and the metrics. That's one side of it. But if you only have that, it's incomplete. So it's one of these other correlative pairs. You have art and you have something else. I don't know what to call it really. Call it structure, art and structure. Let's use that term. And sometimes we have forgotten about the art, that it is something that is deeply practical. We need the practical wisdom, if you will, which is another interesting combination, practice and wisdom. I mean, you need both. And I hope this can help us to emphasize the practitioner perspective a bit more. And if you think about the word change, again, going back to the original meaning in Chinese, it can mean the word yi or yi in the I Ching, that can mean both change and easy. So that can also help us to realize that change is easy, change is natural. Sometimes we think that it's stability we want, everything firmly fixed, and change is just the exception. Coming back to the exception and the expected and the surprise. Whereas in Asia, from 7,000 years ago, they flipped it around. It's change that is the natural state. That's the only constant. And when you have times of stability, you can be happy because that's not the normal state. Going back to this mythological animal, the dragon, which is the most powerful mythological animal, which is the ultimate shapeshifter. So, yeah.
Good. Well, Erik, thank you very much. You've given me, and I hope everybody listening, great new excitement of going back to your book, The Art of Change, and then from there to I Ching, and thinking about these philosophies to guide us better than perhaps we're guided in the past. So,
Yeah, thank you for having me, Hunter. And I think it's very practical. It's about effectiveness, and it's about this timely balance. I think those are the key words for me, and it's deeply practical, and it goes back to a lot of natural metaphors, which are very, very concrete, actually.
yes. Yeah, the flow metaphor I think is really, really helpful. And I'm personally guilty. I make a lot of 2-column tables with, this versus that, X versus Y, and
And
I'm
that's
learning
perfect.
that's not.
That's perfectly okay, as long as you can realize that sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other, and sometimes they change into each other. Night and day is a typical example. The sunny side of the mountain, the shady side of the mountain. That's the original meaning of the yin and yang, actually. So yin and yang is very abstract, very fluffy. But the original meaning is sunny side of the mountain, shady side of the mountain. Very concrete, and you can realize they over the course of the day, the sunny side of the mountain will turn into the shady side of the mountain.
Yeah.
So everything changes.
Well, as I said at the outset, Erik, you give us a better way to think, so we're very grateful for that. So we'll link to the book on our summary page. The Art of Change. Well, you can find it on Amazon and elsewhere. Is there anywhere else where you would encourage people to find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. There's a page with all the books. It's yokoso press.se, and there you can find samples of the books, and they're also on LeanPub if you prefer the digital version, the PDF version.
Yep.
So physical versions on Amazon, digital on Amazon or on LeanPub.
Good. Well, once again, Erik, thank you. I'm going to dive right back in as soon as we finish today. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure, Hunter.
This has been another episode of the Value Creators Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can visit thevaluecreators.com for links and resources related to this episode, and check out hunterhastings.com for more content on entrepreneurial business management based on value creation principles.